Right, 17 minutes past 9 this morning. Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Yeah, good.
A bit of a whimper as opposed to a bang start for the URC, but at the same time, plenty of lessons for us to learn and plenty for us to get stuck into. Let's start with Ulster Connacht. I think we probably expect Ulster to be better than Connacht this year, and the difference between the relative strength and depth of the two squads was clear. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it was in all the games, Ger, it was a bit rusty, which is understandable. I think a lot of them were disrupted with pre-season and players away and all that kind of stuff, which teams right across the board, even the Welsh and Scottish teams, didn't have. They lost pre-season friendlies last week with the Queen's passing and stuff like that. So everyone was kind of disrupted. So you're going to see some mistakes and errors, but I think I was a little bit concerned. I would be a little bit concerned for Connacht that physically they got out-muscled and dominated, particularly up front. And with all due respect to Ulster, I know they're building something, and Dan McFarlane has made them harder and abrasive, and they're a very good side on their day. That would be concerning, that you'd be dominated. I think their discipline was really poor. Andy Friend spoke about it afterwards, and that's under pressure. And it wasn't, I know Connacht are missing some players as well, but I just looked at the back five and Thornby, Fafita, Paul Boyle, Conor Oliver, Josh Murphy. That's not a bad kind of loose five, second row, back row. And the game was very kind of even up to probably 30 minutes, and then McCluskey comes up with that brilliant offload for Luke Marshall's try, and then the game kind of changed in momentum. They scored another try, and you just felt at half time that even though it was only 14-3, that Connacht needed to come out of the blocks in the second half and show a bit of aggression and energy, and they were just lacking a little bit. It's worrying but not concerning.
It's worrying because it's kind of similar to the pattern that we saw last season, in that they can't withstand a lot of pressure, that eventually the defence breaks.
Yeah, I think so. And look, to be fair, Ulster will probably do that to a lot of teams this year when they get on a roll, and I think they're a very balanced side, and their attack is really good, and they can hurt you. But I think 4 of the tries probably came from mauls. They didn't score the 4 of them from the mauls, but just a little bit soft in their defensive efforts there in the forwards. And I think for Connacht, when they come under a bit of pressure then, and that's what Andy Friend was talking about openly after the game, they're giving away penalties and they're kind of crumbling a little bit. You've got to be patient. But look, it's very early days, and it's a tough place to go. But to be beaten 36-10, Caelan Blade scores a brilliant try in 70 minutes or something like that, and it's really only a consolation. But the game just completely got away from them in the second half, and it was Ulster on the front foot all the time.
Where are Ulster in the hierarchy of the 4 provinces now?
They're probably number 2, given that they beat Munster in that quarter-final last year up in Belfast, and convincingly in the end. Munster had, probably brought one of their worst performances of the season to a quarter-final, and Ulster, have kind of stepped up a little bit. They should have beaten the Stormers probably in that semi-final in the URC, so easily could have been in the final. When Ulster are good, they seem to be very hard to stop. Their flow, momentum, they play with pace, tempo. They have a lot of kind of X-factor players who can just do special things. I know James Hume wasn't there the other night, but I love him in the centre. I think McCluskey has been brilliant for him. They seem to know how they want to play, and are really, really well organised. But obviously they came up against Toulouse last year and were underpowered a little bit, which is so. Ulster in Europe is hard to see them winning a European Cup, but I think they'll be right in the mix in the URC, and at the moment they're probably number 2.
How good is Nathan Doak?
I've always been impressed with him. I think he's matured. He's still so young. Control, and they're very lucky because John Cooney brings a different type of energy as well. They've 2 brilliant scrum halves there, and I think Nathan Doak could be someone right in the mix next year for the World Cup, and even November we'll probably see him. Could see him in the A game or even against Fiji. I think he's always been touted as a top class player, and
now's the time to get. I mean, he's still very young, so you don't want to rush him, and you don't want to invest too much hope. Still, I think 21, around that. And like,
well, he's playing enough of big games, Ger, now to be physically kind of used to the contact, the collisions. I think he's mature, calm and controlled. So, you know, he can only get better. But I think he's right up there now to put pressure on the Irish scrum halves that are ahead of him.
The Connacht obviously are off to South Africa. A nice, handy,
it's tricky, yeah.
handy
it's
start.
Tricky for them. They got the Stormers and the Bulls in the next couple of weeks. But, you know, they are a side that when they play and hold on to the ball, and it sounds very obvious, when they eliminate mistakes, and they're a very dangerous side, Connacht, and they can score a lot of brilliant tries. And we've said that about them for the last number of years. It's just in these... They should have made that more of a dogfight the other night. They made it too easy at times for Ulster to score the tries. And, you know, they can go to South Africa and, you know, they'll throw the ball around and they can be brilliant at that. But they've got to do the fundamentals well, scrum, line out, breakdown, things like that, and be more cohesive as a unit. A lot of very, very good individual players, but I still think they're underpowered a little bit. And they're similar to Munster in a sense that, you know, they were in the market for front row players as well, but they're very hard to come by a year out from the World Cup as well. And not just from a budget point of view, but from quality being available. And they have some young players coming through there that, again, like Munster, they want them to stand up and hopefully come through. But it's difficult when you look at the depth of you know, that Leinster front row and stuff. It's a great scenario for Leo Cullen to have that kind of quality, and it does make a difference in these type of games.
Yeah. Connacht obviously have several players away with the emerging Ireland. I think it's 5 in the squad, or maybe it's 6.
It's 5, yeah.
5, yeah. So obviously they'll be in South Africa at the same time as the as Connacht playing those games too. So it's going to be tricky for Connacht for this period of time. You just have to hope they can.
Yeah, and then they've got Stormers, Bulls, 2 games there. You know, it's tough for any of the teams going to South Africa now. The South Africans coming into the URC have you know, particularly winning it last year with the Stormers and all South African final. They're going to get better. They're going to get more confident. And
yeah.
I think it's good for the league, and it's good for the Irish provinces to keep testing themselves physically against them. So it's a tough couple of weeks. If they got a win there, 1 win, it'd be great. But it's a tough look. And Dan McFarlane, I was reading quotes on him. Every team seems to have a difficult run at the start. I remember Munster last year, 2 home games against the South African teams who were completely disjointed and just trying to get together. But this is difficult for them. And then they've got Munster at home in that 4th one, which I'm sure they'll be targeting, and they always get up for that. And Munster Connacht games in the last number of years, there's been a nice bit of bite to them. But you think it's a very tough start for them. And it's the last thing they need, Ger, because they need to try and get a little bit of momentum. I think they'd have been very disappointed last year to kind of slip down a little bit and not make the playoffs, not make Europe. Because I think they were building something really nice for a couple of years there, and
yeah,
it's just stuttered a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, and we hope that will re-emerge. That
and it's difficult for them budget-wise. They don't have the same type of finances, and it's difficult to get players.
The emerging Ireland game is 10 days away or 11 days away at this stage. The first one's the Friday afternoon, and then it's Friday, Wednesday, Sunday. So, which is more important at the moment for Irish rugby? The next 3 weeks of URC, or that emerging Ireland 3 games?
I was speaking about this with Adrian on Friday. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the international team always takes preference for me. It has to, and that's, even if I was a player, it can be frustrating. If you're a provincial player and you're losing players to emerging Ireland tours, Ireland A's, internationals, or they're not played in the derby matches at Christmas. I think it's the most important thing, and we spoke at length the last time, didn't we, after the World Cup, when we came back, about how can we find something that's different, that we can at least kind of throw our hat and say, well, we tried something different. And I think the credit to the Irish team, they've tried, the Irish management, they've tried to do that. We were speaking about, you know, picking players who were playing for overseas clubs and seeing what could they bring back, and kind of closing off that, or opening up that loophole and saying, well, we can select guys from abroad. I think this tour is even though when you go through the list, there's probably 4 or 5 that you would think could actually now go into an Irish team in November. There's probably another 3 or 4 could put their hands up for a World Cup. So it's kind of, if you get 4 or 5 players out of this in the next year, I think it's been a success. So I think it's even though it's probably frustrating for the provincial coaches, and you can think Andy Friend is trying to pick his team, Peter Wilkins, up this week, and have everyone available, try and get their internationals back as well, and you think you're going off to South Africa and you're losing a couple of more players. Munster's team next week will be totally different. 10 of the players, they've 10 going, haven't they? Is it 10 or 11? They've 10. All those 10 were involved in the match against Cardiff at the weekend, and all that 10 are gone now.
Yeah.
So
I suppose you've got to get the good of having them on your squad. So you're definitely playing them if they're not going to be around. It's tough. It is tough. I do want to ask you about kind of in that context the Leinster Zebra game. It was interesting that they didn't start with Frawley from the start. That
well, he was in New Zealand, so I think there must be some sort of a. Something different here, because I think the plan was that, within reason, obviously the guys who started the tests in New Zealand wouldn't be involved till round 3. That's kind of was the plan.
Okay.
So, Kieran Frawley didn't start the test matches, so maybe there's a different reason.
It counts the same, does it? I mean, it's never made public. This player will play this number of minutes.
So it's an individual thing. So I'm not privy to what that was, but I would imagine it's because he didn't start. Because when they came back from New Zealand, they would have had an extra couple of weeks off, and obviously go on their holidays and all that kind of stuff. So I was surprised to see him involved, but maybe there's a break factored in somewhere along the line for him in the next couple of weeks that. Or maybe Leo Cullen asked, could we have them for the first couple of games?
Yeah.
What does Leo Cullen say to them after that match, where it's like, this could have been one of the greatest collapses ever? Like, or was it something that they kind of were vaguely in control of what they were? We're still going to win this.
You think, Johnny, at 28, I think it's 21-0 after 26 minutes. You're thinking this is going to be 50, 60 pointer here. And like, from a neutral's point of view, you're thinking, God, it's brilliant that Zebra came back and they're making a fist of this and they're actually playing brilliant rugby. Like the offloads they had in the game, the line breaks were all superior to Leinster. Leinster were very efficient and direct early on, and I think after the game you're kind of going, first and foremost, you're kind of wiping the brow saying, thanks be to God, we could have lost that. I mean, if you look at the last couple of minutes of that game, it was... it's 33-29, and they have brilliant opportunities. They're holding on to the ball. Eventually they drop it, and there's an air of relief. I think the changes that kind of came in, Leinster were right down the depth chart there, and they just needed a little bit more control and composure, and they didn't have that. So you can look at it from two ways. It's a great learning experience, and you still got the bonus point win.
They shipped 29 points, like.
Yeah, they did, and given the scoreline the way it was, they lost the second half 19-5. Does that make any difference? Not really. And the bonus point was coming home for Leinster, but a little concerning again. But it's hard to be critical on any of the teams at this stage of the season, because there's going to be a bit of rust. They obviously switched off a little bit. Leinster standards have been so high, and they've always had this kind of ruthless word connected with them, even with their internationals gone. So I think that's kind of a pivotal moment. But if you think back to the last year, they lost the game early on. I think it was first or second game away to Dragons over in Rodney Parade in Wales, and or they barely won the game. I think they barely won it 7-6 or something like that. And there was a lot of criticism there that so they turned around their season and went on a pretty strong run. So I wouldn't be too concerned with the depth they have. But it was brilliant to see Zebra kind of, show their quality.
Parma and the name now as well, and they're trying to kind of...
Yeah, but I think they'll score a lot of tries this year.
They've like 20-odd new players.
Yeah, they have, and they've some brilliant attacking players. Their back three were outstanding, and so, yeah, it was a game I think that he would have been reading the riot act to him if they lost it in the end, but it wasn't a case of they were comfortable the last kind of 7 or 8 minutes. They were kind of defending very strongly, but Zebra kind of lost control of the ball and stuff. But they'd be happy obviously in the end. But
let's move on to Munster then. They're beaten 2013 in Cardiff on Saturday afternoon. Game moved from the Friday. You were talking about rustiness, and they were super rusty. Like, Malachy Fekitoa, I think, knocks on his first ball, which, and then he gets into the game. So we're not making any rash judgments on it. What will the team have learned from the performance? What will they be thinking? Okay, well, that didn't work. This needs to improve. Was that essentially the start of like a pre-season friendly still, because they haven't played enough games together?
Yeah, and I think what kind of stood out for me was that, and I think Graham Rowntree had to do this, even though because of all the changes he has in the next couple of weeks, and I think because of the Emerging Ireland tour, things could have been a little bit different in pre-season, where they actually said, well, let's try and get as many of these players who are going to start the first URC game playing against Gloucester and London Irish. But because after they play Cardiff, there's going to be there's probably 13, 14 changes next week to their game against Dragons, that he had to mix and match those pre-season friendlies. So they haven't got a kind of a clear, and sometimes it needs a couple of games. There was some positives in the game, definitely. What they were trying to do, you could see from the attack. I think what they lacked a little bit was control themselves, and just sometimes making a decision to say, you know what, it's a little bit risky here trying to move the ball, and someone calls a play and they're trying to get a bit of width in it, and then maybe it's time just to put the ball down or find a way to kind of get some territory. And I think right at the end, Cardiff were just kind of inviting him onto him, believing that they'd stop them and they'd turn them over at the breakdown, and they got the score right at the end. I think if you look at Munster getting a losing bonus point there, it's not a bad result, given that the starting team had 13 Welsh internationals, and it should have been 14. Owen Lane pulled out before the game in the warm-up, and Alan Summerhill came in. He's a really good player. So when I was doing my research for this game,
is it the strongest Cardiff team in a long time?
It is, yeah. And Di Young has said that himself. I think obviously Liam Williams went off, and it was very unfortunate for him. He's a top bloke.
But they brought on Rhys Priestland,
Yeah, so they have, it's a strong side, and a lot of these guys played against South Africa in the summer. So you can kind of look at it both ways. I think Munster would have been frustrated when they look back at the video. They'll be quite frustrated at a lot of the time they got caught kind of behind the gain line with an impact tackle, and 3 or 4 Munster players ahead of that player. So to retreat and get back around and resource the ball was difficult. Cardiff were really counter-rucking very aggressively, so they got turned over a lot at the breakdown. Very concerning. I think the knock-ons and the drop balls were starting to become a little bit alarming, as the game went on. And I don't know, is it just guys switching off or just being a little bit rusty? But I thought, Fekitoa started, he's running that hard line off a line out and he knocks it on, hits him into the middle of the chest. Chris Farrell dropped a couple, Alex Candellan. Paddy Patterson was superb with his delivery and his sniping. Probably just got a bit excited and put 2 grubbers in it at times when he was making great breaks. But I think he was absolutely brilliant in the game. Fell off a couple of tackles, and if you look at the 3 tries they conceded, well, they'll be frustrated with that. I think really frustrated. So you can look at it both ways. Certainly from their own viewpoint, when they analyse the video, and if you're being harsh analysing what they could do better, the breakdown and the ball handling needs to be a lot better.
Okay, all fixable, like.
Well, I would think so, yeah, but that comes with a bit of cohesion as well, Ger. So, I think it's very early days. I think sometimes it's down to personnel as well and what they can and can't do. But, Chris Farrell looked very frustrated coming off. He's a much better player than probably what we saw early on. Fekitoa, the same, looked frustrated. They all had glimpses in the game.
What's the story of Frisch? People saying that he's potential bolter for Ireland sooner rather than later. Everybody who comes in who we've never seen playing in an Irish context all of a sudden is like the next bolter. But what's his ceiling?
I think they're very, very, very enthused by him. His potential. Obviously, he's still a very young player and hasn't been exposed to top level rugby consistently. I think they were impressed with him in Bristol as well and what his potential is. He's still only 23, so what I'm hearing is that they really like him and he has serious potential, and I think that's why he's going on that emerging tour to South Africa. He is someone who could come right into the mix. Obviously, we've got to see it ourselves, and he's got to do it. You can be enthused and excited about certain players, but they've got to show it then when they go out in the field and play. But I think he's someone definitely that they're really, really happy with, and they're hopeful that he can make a real impact there.
Okay. Is there any word on the long-term injuries around Munster, RG Snyman in particular? It's kind of gone very quiet.
I think he's pretty close. I think he is. I think they've been obviously trying to get this right and make sure that, like any knee injury, I think there was a small little, soreness there and a cartilage issue over the summer, which is fine now. And I think, look, he's someone that obviously he's a game changer if he's playing for him, and everybody I think wants to see him back and playing. So I think he's pretty close. It'll whether it'll be in this block of matches, I'm not sure, but I'd rather hold him back for another couple of weeks and have him, for Europe and post Christmas and stuff like that. But I'm sure he wants to get back playing himself, and when he's ready, he'll be ready. But I think he's pretty close.
The last thing we were talking about in the build up to the whole season was the front row and the need for players to step forward. Obviously, we're not going to make a judgment after one game, but was there anything encouraging signs?
I tell you, that's what I was going to talk about. Keane Knox and Roman Salanoa, again, early days, but they're up against internationals there, and Rhys Carey, he's a very strong scrummager. I think both of them played really well.
Okay.
I think they were and I looked at the scrum each time, they were rock solid and they were getting a little nudge at times, and that's the stuff that I want to see before the stuff around the field, because that's where they're going to be judged. And I think both of them played.
You can layer on the stuff around the field.
Yeah, well, I'd see. Both of them are. Kenny Knox was making carries, trying to poach ball, making impact tackles. When Roman Salanoa came on, he was the same. I think he hit Talupi Faletau at one stage and smashed him backwards, and I think he did that on a couple of occasions with Cardiff players running hard, and he has that kind of strength and power.
Yeah, so as much as RG Snyman's going to be a game changer, having
them getting better, for sure. And they've got Stephen Archer has had an injury for the last few weeks, and the next tight is James French, so that's an area that there is concern. And if those players step up and at least get their set piece stuff right, i.e. rock solid scrum, well, that'll be a massive plus for Munster.
Okay. Anything else from the weekend?
Well, the Rugby Championship's still alive. I think obviously when South Africa Argentina, that was incredible. A game the other night with Argentina are pretty dominant 22-6, or South Africa pretty dominant 22-6 up, and then Argentina come right back and then they changed gears and just won it in the end. So they're all level at the top, New Zealand, South Africa, and
New Zealand game insane as well, right at the game.
Insane on Thursday morning. It was just incredible.
Australia have written to the World Referees Board saying, come on, this needs to be fixed.
And I think obviously technically, Mathieu Renal was right. There's footage there that you can clearly hear him saying it numerous times, but we haven't seen it before. We haven't seen it.
No, it's like the free in GAA when the goalkeeper comes out of the small parallelogram. It's actually supposed to be, at one stage it was a free, a 65 to the opposition, and you're like, oh, that seems. And then it happened once, I think, in like an underage final, and it was like, no, you can't be doing this. But maybe you can.
Big call, and
maybe you just do it now from now on.
You'd be thinking we'd be giving out as well.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Look, if they're going to do it now, they probably have to do it throughout the game. If you go on, I'll finish with this. If you go onto YouTube and you watch a game, the highlights of a game, or even put on a full game on YouTube, and you say, right, the ball is kicked to touch, and you go for a line out, and you press forward to get to the line out, you can probably do that 3 or 4 times, and they're 15-second blocks before the line out is even set. So there's definitely issues in rugby, and it's the same with a scrum, Johnny. If there's a knock on, you can hit it forward 3 times, I'd say, before that scrum is actually set. So we have a lot of dawdling and foostering and delaying throughout the game.
They'll change the game if they fix that.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million.